Guten Tag. I am Tony Two-Tone and welcome back to my series, Is It Better Than? I've had a bit of a channel hiatus, but recently, amidst a move, I've found myself with a heaping of free time, so expect a flurry of videos in the next month or so. Originally around this time, I planned on playing through Outer Worlds to do an Is It Better Than for the upcoming sequel, Outer Worlds 2. But then, that beautiful announcement came during the Nintendo Presents with a surprise release date of a week for Hades 2. I became full mast and changed my entire focus to this new pursuit of Hades 2, and thus, here we are. If you're new to this channel, Is It Better Than is a series where I compare and contrast previous games to their current sequel, or I might compare a studio's output against one another, or similar games to one another. Definition is pretty loose, to be honest. But what is important are the categories. I compare each game's stories, presentation, progression systems, combat, and finally characters / companions / bosses / whatever I'm feeling on a given day. On this specific day, I'm going to compare weapons, which in my opinion is the most important aspect to each run in both Hades. I will still comment on characters and bosses, but those will be in a separate section. The last section is reserved for the weapons. I thought about doing boons and boon givers, but this would be far too difficult to rank and take far too long, so tough titties. At the very end, I will make a judgment call on which game is better, and from there I will give each game a letter grade and slide it into my ever-evolving tier list that encompasses every game I have played on this channel. Last thing to wrap up before we start is that, keep in mind, these are strictly my opinions. Approximately 0% of this coverage will be objective. Numeros 2. Hades is a complete game that has been out for years and has received the benefit of numerous patches and updates, while Hades 2 is less than a month old at the time of writing. There may be some alternative universe where my judgments and critiques might be addressed in a later patch, but I am purely critiquing its essence at launch. Okay, yapping out of the way, let's dive into Hades 1 and 2. Hey, D's. Hey, these nuts ain't gonna suck themselves. Hades is a roguelite action role-playing game developed and published by Supergiant Games in 2020 for computer systems and the Nintendo Switch. It was later ported to other modern consoles, but that came at a later date. Supergiant has a vast and varied library of critically acclaimed indie gems, and Hades was another notch in this historic belt. Its release was preceded by a lengthy early access period which allowed Supergiant to polish Hades to an unprecedented degree by the proper release date time. Upon release, it was lauded with praise and to this day is seen as the peak of the roguelite genre, a vast and varied genre of games taking inspiration from the classic computer game with an emphasis on individual runs and punishing losses. It was basked with 9s and 10s across the board and even took home Indie Game of the Year from the Game of the Year Awards ceremony. This was truly a zeitgeist moment in the indie roguelike sphere and is still upheld as one of the best games of all time. As far as my previous experience with Hades, I had always heard about it, but never got a chance to play it. That was until the Christmas break of 2022, where I developed COVID and was unable to go home for the holidays for college. Thus, cooped up alone in my apartment during a particularly nasty Seattle winter, I blasted through Hades. I became addicted to this game like few others. Never did quite beat it, but man, the memories I have attached to that time period never faded. So with the surprise announcement of Hades 2, I was more than thrilled to jump back in and see either how well or how poorly Hades has held up since my last incursions. So, let's dive into the story of Hades.
Is this Hades?
Hades takes place in the underworld of ancient Greek mythology. We play as Zagreus, Hades' son. Zagreus is hellbent, because hell and the underworld, on escaping his father's clutches, and finally being allowed to see what life is like on the surface, and to find his mother. He's aided in this cause by other gods, the OGs, the classics like Zeus and Poseidon, and many others who gift you boons, power-ups that can enhance certain skills Zagreus possesses that are themed around the god gifting them. For example, Aphrodite's boons are all love-based, thus animations are riddled with hearts. Zeus's boons are thunder, so you see lightning cracks. Demeter's are ice, you get the gist. Now, the neat gimmick about Hades is that you yourself are a god. This means in no uncertain terms, you're unkillable. Supergiant uses this concept to its fullest, and the storytelling incorporates Zagreus' cumulative deaths as anchor points to tell an overarching story. This means you can be killed by your father just to respawn in the House of Hades and get shit-talked by him all the same. It is a brilliant concept, and you know I go bananas for gameplay-focused storytelling. Incorporating the idea of game overs into your story is a breath of fresh air and leads to a level of immersion that is difficult to match. This immersion is never broken because you have to reload a save after running out of lives. You just keep trucking along and the story reacts to your quote-unquote death. What I love the most about Hades is how it manages to get me so invested in this story despite the relative lack of stakes present in the storytelling. This isn't a battle between good and evil, it's not the prevention of the end of the world, it is a rather light-hearted, intimate, familial drama between a father and a son, and despite all of this, I remained invested throughout the runtime. This is such a magnificent feat to pull off. I mean, even in fucking Mario, you're on a journey to protect the Mushroom Kingdom in your sweet Peach's honor from Bowser's lizard cock. Yet in Hades, there is no world to be saved, there's no damsel in distress, there is just a rebellious son looking to finally experience the outside world and meet his long-lost mother. The game's tone also perfectly reflects this. The lighthearted, jokey tone fits snugly into the setting because of these low stakes that are present. It allows for humor to not feel off-kilter and allows for a variety of different perspectives on Zagreus' journey. We have supportive characters like your mother figure Nyx, who despite raising you, helps you along your journey to meet your birth mother. You have one of my favorites, Achilles, who's just a good-natured soul, wanting you to accomplish your dreams. However, on the other hand, you have equally well-written characters who take up an opposite view of your decision. Meg, your ex, feels understandably betrayed by your sudden compulsion to abandon those around you and fuck off despite who you might hurt. Thanatos also feels a similar way, but is having a much harder time coming to grips with said feelings of betrayal and heartbreak. There are no bad guys or good guys. There is just a community of characters that surround you that each have their own beliefs and feelings, and some of my favorite moments in this action-oriented game are the downtime between runs where you get to converse with the cast. Speaking of cast, let's talk about our main character, Zagreus. Zagreus is such a perfect character to center this entire conflict around. He carries himself with such an unwavering determination, yet comes off as genuinely caring to those around him. He is also funny and constantly was making me giggle, or at the very least smirk. Sure, he may fall into the quippy archetype, but god damn it, I like quips. I like to be quipped at. I like Spider-Man, okay? I have no aversion to quips as long as they are funny, and Zagreus has many more hits than misses in this regard. He is a likable character to follow, and he helped ensure that every conversation was at the very least colorful. Now, let's talk about the quote-unquote villain, Hades. Hades is the perfect foil to Zagreus, a much more mature and serious person who has a sense of pride that can be to his detriment. He is the perfect persona that you love to hate and hate to love. After that first beatdown he gave me, I was fucking peeved. But I couldn't help but snicker when I arrived back at the house of Hades to him shit-talking me and elbozoing me. He also does a great job reflecting Zagreus' actions back to the player, and you can kind of see where Hades is coming from. Like, yeah, Zagreus is kind of a twat who's just mooching off his daddy and shirking his responsibilities. But, on the other hand, we see how immature Hades is in his own respect when it comes to his interactions with Zagreus' mother. Hades teeters on being a dick, but in an awkward fatherly way. A fatherly dick, if you will. Wait, let's end on the ending. Spoilers ahead, so tread carefully. You've been warned. After you finally beat your old man's ass, you get introduced to your long-lost mother, Persephone, and come to find out Zagreus cannot exist on the surface, otherwise he loses his life source. This gives you an excuse to pursue more runs in an effort to talk with your mother enough to figure out the whole story of why she left and what to do about it. Again, a brilliant reincorporation of story into gameplay by thinking of a reason that you don't just win once and call it quits. After roughly 10 more clears after your first one, you finally convince your mother to come back to the underworld and be part of the family with your father. What I love about this ending is the air of uncertainty. The gods are not aware of this arrangement, and it's kind of left vague whether or not they would approve of it. So it ends on a high note with a tinge of possibility left up in the air. Now, if you max relationships with every single character in the game, you can get the epilogue ending, which is very kumbaya, but it requires so much persistence and effort that it truly feels earned and a little less hokey. I loved this story. It's so refreshing to have a low-stakes oriented approach while simultaneously having me slurp up every bit of dialogue from each character. I can confidently say I've never felt more invested in a plot that is so devoid of any consequence, and this just allowed me to lay back and enjoy the conversations in front of me without worrying about the fate of the universe. It sucked me in and let me care about this mythical Greek family drama, and I love it for that. Sure, not every joke lands, and there are plenty of character interactions that did not do it for me, but the overwhelming amount did. And just the pacing, the lack of fluff, and the hyper-focus allowed me to bask in the masterpiece that is this plot. Now, let's see how it stacks up to its successor. Hades 2. Hey, these two nuts ain't gonna suck themselves! So stupid. Hades 2 is a roguelite action RPG developed and published by Supergiant Games in 2025 for computer systems, the Nintendo Switch, and the Nintendo Switch 2. Currently, at the time of writing this, these are the only places to play Hades 2, but I am sure in due time that will change. I played Hades 2 on the Nintendo Switch 2 as it felt like the perfect platform to play it on, and to finally get some fucking mileage out of this son of a bitch besides Donkey Kong Bonanza and Mario Kart World, but that's a separate discussion. Hades 2 serves as Supergiant's first official sequel to a game they have made. Understandably so, as Hades was such an overwhelming success that it makes total sense to strike while the iron is hot and follow up the massive success that was Hades with a full-fledged sequel. Upon release, Hades 2 was lathered with praise, receiving multiple 9s and 10s across the board, with its most significant being a rare 10 out of 10 from IGN. I am not a betting man, but I would put the life of my two bozo cats on the line in saying I believe Hades 2 will at least get a Game of the Year nomination, if not an outright win in one of the categories. Needless to say, hype was at an all-time high. Hades 2 was in a difficult situation. How do you follow up one of the best indie games of all time? Do you build upon systems or take wild swings and risks in hopes of pushing the envelope even further? These questions and many more weighed on my mind coming into Hades 2, so let's explore their approach, starting with the story.
And you, Hades, will rule all!
In Hades 2, you play as Melanoi, the princess of the underworld and sister of Zagreus. From the get-go, Hades 2 establishes, this ain't your dad's Hades. The tone is 10 times moodier, and the stakes are truly at an all-time high. Playing Hades 2 right after Hades damn near gave me whiplash in the extreme switch of tones, but not necessarily in a bad way. In Hades 2, the entire mythological Greek universe is under attack. In the underworld, Kronos, the Titan of Time, has managed to put himself back together like a genocidal Humpty Dumpty after being cut to bits by his children, the gods. You should recognize the story of the Titan Kronos and his dismemberment by his offspring, and if not, read a fucking book. Anywho, Kronos has now taken over the underworld, captured Hades and the rest of Melanoi's family, including Zagreus, and is using his power of time to prevent himself from ever being killed. Thus, the reincorporation of successive runs come from either losing and Melanoi transporting herself back to the crossroads at the last minute, or Kronos resetting the clock if you beat him. I think the victory condition is really cool and a smart way of incorporating gameplay into the story, but I think the resetting of Melanoi by herself is pretty weak, but that's a relatively small complaint. Back to the plot. Kronos is also wreaking havoc on Mount Olympus by reviving the father of monsters, Typhon, to launch an assault on the overworld. Oh yeah, baby, there are 2 zones to fight through in Hades 2 rather than the one like in the first. As far as the story goes, I think it's rather great, with one big flaw that I will save for the end. The tone is perfect, and I think the mood/atmosphere of Hades 2 perfectly reflects this. This isn't a lighthearted romp like the first game. This is a massive endeavor where the stakes could not be higher. This drastic shift in tone allows the story of Hades 2 to stand completely on its own without feeling like some sort of rehashing of the first game. And this is the first example of Hades 2 standing on its own 2 feet whilst being heavily inspired by its predecessor. So, in the Crossroads, you are surrounded by a group of characters who are hell-bent on stopping Kronos and bringing the good old days back. The cast is fine. I think they perfectly encapsulate the vibe that Hades 2 is setting, but they feel like awkward reinterpretations of Hades characters just in this new environment. Hecate is great and original, being the motherly teacher who is overlooking the entire mission and ensuring everything is chugging along smoothly. However, everyone around her suffers. Is that how you see... How do you say that? Pronunciation. Come on. You can do it, little guy. What do we got? Hecate. Okay. Hecate is great and original, being the motherly teacher who is overlooking the entire mission and ensuring everything is chugging along smoothly. However, everyone around her suffers. Odysseus is just Achilles, but more uncle-coded rather than friend. Moros, the Doom guy, is just Thanatos, but somehow even more autistic. Nemesis is just Meg, but without the character growth Meg shows. In Hades, Meg is also very dismissive of our main character, but eventually we see her open up and reveal that it's because of the betrayal of Zagreus, up and leaving out of the blue, that has caused her sudden iciness. Nemesis is jealous of Melinoë until you finally get her to open up and reveal that Nemesis is jealous of Melinoë. From the first encounter, you see exactly where this overarching story is going. As far as characters I did enjoy, they all happen to be characters you meet during your runs. I think Narcissus is genuinely the funniest character in either of the Hades games, with his voice actor giving his best Nicolas Cage impression, and his writing is pretty hilarious. Icarus has the most wholesome relationship with Melinoë and allows us to see a different angle of her, and it's rather sweet. Finally, the bosses and their banters are some of my favorite moments in the game, with the humorous conversations between Melinoë and the Sirens, or Melinoë and the Cyclops. Those are fucking fantastic. Polypheus had me laughing on multiple occasions. On the other hand, I equally loved the intense dialogue with Prometheus or Kronos, which both expanded on the antagonist's views, and, respectively, the intense hatred from Melinoë. Speaking of Melinoë, let's talk about our main character. She's okay. I think this determined stoic angle is not a bad one to take for a main character. I mean, hell, the most famous RPG main character is Cloud, and he's the exact same. The problem with Mel is her surrounding cast is not interesting enough to bounce off her even-keeled nature. Every character is either similarly dead serious like Hecate or Nemesis, or antithetically slapstick comedy like Dora or Arachne. Sure, Hades had Dusa, who I also disliked, but Dusa fit more with the laid-back tone. It's a lot harder to stomach a character like Eris, who is actively preventing Melinoë from saving the world, and then we're supposed to be buddy-buddy, hoo-hoo, hee-haw back at Crossroads. These tones are juxtaposed, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, so even the characters that aren't serious just aren't that strong. In this regard, Melinoë's personality, while not being bad, just isn't given enough interactions to truly shine. Sure, she's unique from Zagreus' every little thing gonna be alright personality, but I can't entirely say it's for the best. That's why I highlighted the NPCs that show up during runs, because they manage to be different enough from Melinoë and highlight her personality without hurting the entire tone of the game. I think of people like Heracles, who is tonally dark and serious, but different enough from Melinoë to bounce off of her in a synthetical way. Let's now switch gears to our villain Kronos. I absolutely adored him. His design is next level, and he carries such a weight to him that is unmatched by any enemy in Hades. Dude is fucking evil, no way around it. He's not your father who means well, he is a maniac dead set on ending the world, and who has kidnapped and tortured everyone Melinoë cares about. He is a straight fucker, who is rather tough to beat the first couple times you encounter him. He is phenomenal. Then, okay, time for ending talk. Spoilers, skip to this part to avoid them. I know this topic has been beaten to death. I've seen it all over Reddit. I mean, my real-life friends who exist and told me all about it. Melinoë gets her entire ending rug pulled from her, with Zagreus being the one who solves the issue in this saccharine perfect wrap-up. 1, it sideswaps Mel's entire climax and journey, and 2, this is not the game for a kumbaya-ass ending. The stakes are high. Kronos is attempting a full coup/genocide of the gods. Melinoë has been training her entire fucking life for this. It just undercuts any development and comes out of left field, and worse off, the ending is entirely due to Zagreus rather than Melinoë. It just left a sour taste in my mouth because the stakes were so beautifully built. I was expecting this intense standoff climax against an insanely well-developed villain whose side I could understand. If my family chopped me up to bits Dexter style, I would also probably want to beat their fucking asses. But no, instead we get a new fucking boomer grandpa, and all these high-intensity stakes get dropped. Really disappointing way to end the game, but I thought the build up to this point was pretty great, with a unique tone absent from the first.
Well, it's been lovely.
So which story is better? My feelings are this. I believe Hades ends in an exclamation, while Hades 2 ends in an ellipses. This is emblematic of my overall thoughts on the two stories. Hades is a lackadaisical journey that makes me care about its cast more than many other games and sends me on my way on a high note. After its ending, the security defense expert rationale is perfect for post-game content, or as an entire ending note. Hades 2 weaves world-ending stakes sensationally, then stumbles on the ending and never gives me a prominent ending point. It sputters out rather than giving me a proper send-off, and while this may benefit the progression systems of the post-game, it harms the story. With Hades, I put the game down thinking, wow, what a great journey. While in Hades 2, I was more like, well, I guess I'm done now. I know this is just the endings, but I think it is rather demonstrative of overarching stories as well. I'm gonna give Hades the edge when it comes to story. Now, let's move on to the presentations.
One more time.
Hades' presentation is fucking fantastic. Okay, that's the presentation section. So for Hades, no, I'm kidding. But genuinely, where to even start? The graphics themselves are not anything to write home about, but luckily my IQ is not in the single digits, so who the fuck cares? The crown achievement is the artistic design present throughout the entire game. It has such a saturated and vibrant look to all the locations and all of the character designs. So let's just start with those character designs. They are all phenomenal. Each is iconic as the last, and in a genre such as Greek mythology, it would be so easy to just settle on the tried and true formulas for each of these characters. And in some cases they do, a la Zeus and Poseidon, but they also have these unique interpretations on classic designs. Hades looks nothing like previous incarnations of him in similar media, but it works better for the role he plays within the story, being the overbearing father figure to an entire underworld. Nyx and Hypnos each equally give memorable designs and vocal renditions, and don't even get me started on Meg, brother. Her vibe, her voice acting, so fucking hot. Every time she would blow me off in the House of Hades, I'd fucking come seeping out of my eyes like, please give me attention. All of the voice acting in this game is next level, and it adds so much personality to each character that I often would let their full lines play out rather than skipping through them once I read the dialogue. Zagreus would not have half the personality he does without the suave, confident voice Darren Korb instills within him. Meg's voice actress Avalon Penrose, marry me. And each and every one of the gods you interact with carry such weight to them entirely due to the voice acting that instills life into each of these portraits. Again, such a minor detail, but it is quintessential when it comes to the immersion that Hades procures. Let's now tackle the music. Dude. Dude. Fucking rips. It perfectly bounces between upbeat, acoustic guitar-driven chord progressions to outright metal/hard rock influence during key intensive scenes. Not a single track felt out of place, and each theme felt perfect for where it showed up. The percussive opening to every run set the upbeat, focused tone that would follow throughout each attempt. Just as importantly, those heavy-ass riffs of the electric guitar in the finale of the Hades boss fight made me giddy like a little boy, cackling to myself because of the downright aura of that fight. It all emphasized the feeling that the gameplay was attempting to make you feel, and I could not imagine one working without the other. Locations also had their own distinct feel to each. The opening zone felt like baby steps into a wider world. The glow of the lava in the second zone felt equally tranquilizing as it did dangerous, and Elysium had this beautiful turquoise look to it that emphasized a heavenly feel. It helped distinguish each zone from one another and felt like separate legs of a similar journey. Enemies could be hit or miss. I think there were a lot of smaller side enemies that I could do without, but the true highlights were the bosses and mini-bosses for each zone. I've already splooged about Meg, but her sisters are equally as iconic and fitting, filling the role of what they were trying to accomplish. The fucking creepy bitch and the psycho bitch. Both perfection and both relatively tough fights, especially Alecto, who tripped me up multiple times. The Bone Hydra, while being boring combat-wise, looked amazing, and its different forms helped spice up each encounter. And Theseus and the Minotaur might be some of my favorites. Animations look crisp and satisfying, and the arrogant tone of their voice combined with their duo combinations just worked for me. Despite being the most anxiety-inducing zone, the Satyrs zone provided some of my favorite enemy designs, despite producing the worst fucking swamp area that only a Miyazaki could love. It all exceeded expectations and delivered in such a beautiful way. My only, and I mean only, complaint would be the visual noise on screen towards the ends of runs. If you have a good run, you wouldn't be able to see your fucking elbow from your asshole through all these bullet hell encounters. So much going on that is impossible to make out, but somehow still transfixing, like the finale to a fireworks show. I loved every aspect in terms of presentation in this game, from the colors to the sound design to the soundtrack to the overall feel. It just does it for me in the most spectacular of ways.
Moonlight guide me.
So, how is Hades 2? Hades 2 presentation is fucking phenomenal.
Smooth sailing, little Hades.
Okay, so which is better? No, I'm kidding. When coming into Hades 2, I was of the mindset, it's cooked. Best it can hope for is matching presentation rather than exceeding. Fuck my little arrogant butt, I was wrong. Not to put the cart before the horse cock, but this exceeded even my wildest expectations. Again, like with Hades, the highlight is not the graphics. I don't feel like I can reach out and fucking touch Odysseus' pubes in the sun or anything, but it's just the design overall that works. The dark ambient feel of the crossroads perfectly matches the desolate feel that Hades 2 is trying to impose. The underworld masterfully switches from a dark forest to a mechanical underwater zone, to hell-like open fields, and finally an industrial maze leading to Kronos. Each of these are uniquely distinct, and it never feels like each zone is blending into one another, and this is just one half of the available zones. On the surface, we get the much brighter feel to contrast with the underworld. Sure, the darkness of the first city and the dark night on the pirate ships could comfortably fit into the underworld, but these lead to Mount Olympus, which is brimming with sunshine and a wholly different vibe from anything you have encountered, helping it stick out. Animations are also taken to the next level. Sure, attacks can be similar and specials as well, but some of these bosses utilize the leaps in technology since Hades. Prometheus jumping to the screen and camera angles changing, or Typhon's entire fight, which had my jaw on the floor due to the insane animations from Typhon and the Zeus assist. It feels like Hades 2 is a proper sequel in terms of how they approach their artistry. Hades 2 also took the character designs of the first and moved the settings to max. Each portrait slightly glimmers and moves, or sometimes characters blink. There are multiple portraits per character, and backgrounds can change depending on location. Even more care and consideration were devoted to an aspect that was already best in class when it comes to games of similar natures. I want to tarry on designs for a second because they have blown the previous game out of the water. Melanoi's color contrast and overall look is so fantastic, dare I say even better than Zagreus's. Hecate is one of the coolest designs I have ever seen, and my god are there buff mommies galore. Each character, despite problems with writing, are at their best, and become so visually jarring without ever coming off as over-designed. An insanely hard line to delicately balance, but Hades 2 does it with flair. Voice acting is also top-notch. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better or worse than the first, but honestly, keeping up with the original is a feat in and of itself, and just looking back on footage on mute, I can distinctly remember each and every character's voice due to the strength of this acting. The color palette of this game is also so finely tuned. Sure, Hades 1 might be more colorful in general, but the meshing of colors has never been more visually appealing than in Hades 2. The green and black of the forest, the golden gray of Kronos' lair, the red and brown of the hellfields. It just all felt so easy on the eyes. And the soundtrack. Brother, you gotta be yanking my dick. How did they exceed the first game? I came in primed to be a hater, but my god, this soundtrack made me a lover. Hades 2 is at its best when it's paying homage to the first while simultaneously becoming distinct. This soundtrack may have bits and pieces derived from the first game, but the range present throughout is untouchable. You have the obvious electronic influences with the intro, boss soundtracks are even more elaborate and layered than the first, and Kronos' boss theme that incorporates the ticking of a clock into the soundtrack might be my favorite overall theme between games. These are just the underground too, with the overworld themes incorporating orchestral tones and instrumentation in an entirely new direction. This soundtrack is varied, experimental, and pushing the envelope without ever feeling like a Hades soundtrack part 2. It is familiar yet so different that it almost feels wholly unique. I cannot say enough good things about this soundtrack, and overall just the presentation. Like Hades, the screen can get a bit visually noisy, and I often found myself more confused in this game than the previous one. But the overwhelming amount of gorgeous effects, gorgeous animations, and gorgeous character designs more than make up for this facet.
Smooth sailing, little Hades.
So, which do I prefer? Hades is a colorful excursion throughout the many layers of the underworld that is tonally congruent and beautiful to look at. The music is top-notch, and Hades boasts some of my favorite character designs that I have ever seen in a video game. Hades 2 takes every aspect I liked about Hades, flips it on its head, and gives me 5 times more. A wider berth of tracks that all slap, more environments and enemies than I could dream of, and character portraits given additional love and care from an already godlike starting point. I gotta side with Hades 2 here. An impossible feat which I would have never guessed, somehow the beauty of Hades has been one-upped by its sequel. Let's spring into progression.
You're the best boy in the whole world.
When it comes to the progression of Hades, I believe there are 3 separate components to address. There is story progression, inter-run progression, and intra-run progression. Water break. I'm so cold. My freeze. Sorry, I had to hit that chug jug real quick. Where was I? There's story progression, inter-run progression, and intra-run progression. If you don't know the difference between inter and intra, here you go. As far as story progression, I think the Hades formula is fantastic. Being a gross, sweaty RPG nerd, you know a bitch loves reactivity. The amount of reactions, unique conversations with characters in response to an outcome, and variability is unreal. I got about 25 hours into Hades and not a single fucking time did I see a repeat conversation occur. This game would blow me away with all of the conversations revolving around an action I wasn't even fully aware would matter. For instance, gods would commonly react to the weapon I whipped out. If I had a certain weapon aspect, that respective owner would react during that run. Gods would react to other gods' boons, and my favorite interaction in the entire game was when Hypno noted the fact that I took a Soblite to the fucking dome and lost my run. There are so many minute details that characters can respond to that it leaves each conversation just as interesting as the last because you want to see what unique detail your companions will make note of. This obviously applies to story beats as well, as each hurdle you overcome or fail to overcome can lead to a unique conversation with the plethora of available characters at the House of Hades. This helped ensure that even in failure, you weren't absent of progress because even a loss meant companions would interact and react with you. Another story progression component is individual character arcs. Each character can be gifted nectar and/or ambrosia to further your relationship levels with each, as well as granting you a keepsake which can help you on your runs. These are fun and fine. My biggest gripe is just how much you have to emphasize the collection of nectars. These fuckers are not easy to come by. And the NPCs that show up are random, so it is hard to reliably focus on each NPC's story, and you do not have enough nectar to freely gift characters that do show up. As far as the stories go, they are great. Some have overlap with one another like Orpheus and his boo, and others have an intriguing story with Zagreus like Meg and Thanatos. Unfortunately, the most boring ones are the gods, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers, right? They're pretty detached from the overarching story, and most of these conversations are surface layer, but still, fun to at least see, and the reactivity to one another are some of the highlights in this game. When it comes to inter-run progression, I think it's okay. The two main biggies are the development projects and the mirror. The development projects are They can often provide an additional one-off benefit per zone, but for the most part, a vast majority of these upgrades are purely optical. The fountain rooms can be nifty, but even these are up to RNG, so they're anything but reliable. The mirror provides actual run benefits, but it kind of comes off a little lame. They undoubtedly help, but pure stat upgrades never feel impactful. Sure, extra death defiances are OP, but the way to get these upgrades just feels so boring. It's all relegated to a singular currency and lacks any true decision making when it comes to progress. Each benefit does have an alternate option, but it's pretty easy to gauge which one is more useful without even testing the other. This just leads to beelining the most beneficial upgrades, which is relatively easy and lacks any sort of personality to your respective builds. Finally is intra-run progression, which is where Hades shines. Picking boons and power-ups is so much fun and is where a good chunk of the fun of Hades lies. The raw RNG is the magic behind the progression. You very well could walk into a run with a certain goal in mind, but just one good upgrade can completely change the route you were going. A good boon can be the difference between relying on your special rather than regular attack. A hammer upgrade can completely change the overall approach of your run, and a well-timed legendary can lead to an unforgettable build. Let's just look at the gun for instance. One run, I got a hammer upgrade that changed my special artillery attack into a straight-on missile attack that altered how aggressively I played. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I got an artillery upgrade that doubled the size of its attack but could damage Zagreus, so I played extra carefully, blasting then running away. Both times coming into these runs, I had no clue they would turn out this way, but the fun is in adapting and building around the RNG you are given. It leads each run to be filled with surprise and leads to the just one more approach that Hades perfects. The boons themselves also spread the gamut in terms of what they can do. There are no two gods that feel like one another, and each are distinct yet can easily play off other gods' abilities. The mixing and matching of these combinations is downright addicting, and no two runs ever felt the same. I mean that genuinely. Level progression can get a bit stale. Hades' main pull is that you fight room through room, and each successful room clear you are given a reward. The interesting part of this, however, is you are able to see what the next room holds, so this leads to on-the-fly choice making. Do you want that god/goddess's boon, or do you want more max health? Is that specific god worth fighting a mini-boss over? These choices and decision making are the best part of your run, because each room has its own rewards and consequences. The best example of this is the rooms where there are 2 boons you can pick between, but you have to fight a much harder room with the god you shirked aiding the enemies. This can lead to you getting 2 boons in one room, but these rooms are fucking tough and can easily melt your health if unprepared. Weighty choices like this add to the fun of the runs, and this sort of freestyle improv based on your choices makes your individual runs feel personal. I mean, I'm getting sentimental looking back on my footage, being like, the shield charge, what a run. This method of this or that gets a bit stale though, and sure, the Seder floor does throw a slight change up in terms of giving you a bunch of rooms to approach at the beginning, but this is the only different approach level progression takes, and I would have loved to see other zones have similar gimmicks. Overall, progression is pretty fantastic, leading to runs becoming one of the greatest highlights in roguelike history. So, how do you follow this up as a sequel?
You're always here for me.
Hades 2 has a similar 3-prong approach with progression, the story, inter, and intro, but my Zeus does it go above and beyond. Story progression is essentially the same as Hades, a remarkable amount of reactivity is on display here, bolstered by the fact that there is even more content to react to. I mean, there are 2 entirely separate zones that you do runs through, so each and every death plot or revelation gets referenced back at the crossroads. Truly just takes everything good about Hades and implements it once again. My only complaint, story-wise, is I often found myself caring less about the companions' reactions because they do come off a little bland. Hecate is always great to hear from after a big progress leap, like encountering a new boss for the first time or just the various story beats, but outside of this, they kind of didn't have me clamoring to hear what they had to say. Odysseus probably had the most reactions, but they mainly were just scouting reports, and Nemesis just shit-talked, but not in an endearing Hades or Meg way. Once again, characters have their own arcs, but this time there is a plethora of nectar to go around, so I was giving this shit out like candy, and I felt like I saw much more of the cast's stories than I did in the first due to that fact. Hades 2 remedies this ease of progression by mixing up the gifts. For instance, you can offer characters bath salts and have a goonerific personalized hot tub scene with the characters. You can gift them ambrosia and have drinks at the bar, or you can go fishing with them for some reason. All character arcs are kind of not any that particularly stick out to me besides the characters I've already gushed about. The big character twists are also the most obvious shit of all time. Spoilers, so tread carefully. The character named Dora in the Greek mythology game does indeed turn out to be Pandora. I know, contain your surprise. And the biggest one, Hecate, being a future bad timeline version of Melinoy. I mean, from the very start, I was like, green eye and green arm reminds me of someone. And by the end, I was like, Misal Gaib! Neither one of these particularly caught me by surprise, but I think they handle it decently, especially with Dora and Prometheus. Let's talk about inter-progression now, and this is where the largest jump in quality occurs from Hades 1 to Hades 2. First off, the project system has been properly split into 2 separate systems, one that's focused on gameplay with the Cauldron, and one that's purely optical with the Dora building thing. Dora building is whatever, but the Cauldron is actually a really cool twist to add to the progression, and requires a multitude of different ingredients in order to gain additional help during your runs. This can be a chance to spawn a fountain room, unlocking the familiars, which are fucking great, various buffs and benefits during boss fights like the ability to actually freeze time with Kronos with the stop hex, and actually story related events like the eventual defeat of Kronos and Typhon. There's also a separate shop that sells various resources that you might need for your progression system, and ambrosia and nectar available to purchase as well, which is a godsend. The biggest change, however, is the addition of the Arcana card system. This is essentially your mirror, but this time, each respective buff to Melinoy costs a certain amount of power to activate, and you only have so much power to spread around. You have to actually decide which benefits are most important to you, and which you might have to discard. Like everything else, your overall power can be upgraded as well as the cards themselves, and there are some neat cards that don't cost anything, but require certain parameters to be activated, like having no cards with the same cost, or activating a bunch that are close together. This vastly improves on the rather mundane mirror system of the first game, and adds some weight and decision making to your loadouts when going on your runs. With all of these progression systems outside of runs, there's just so much to upgrade or increase or buy that you never feel like you are treading water. Even in the post-game, there's always something to spend your resources on, or something to improve upon that somehow this system becomes the propellant of the one more run ethos. Which leads me to the intra-progression system, i.e. the runs. They're pretty good. I think the boons have never felt better, and the additional gods introduced do so much to increase the run variability, like Hera, the blacksmith dude, not like a black dude named Smith, but like the artisan type of blacksmith, and Hestia. The balancing also feels much better, with each god feeling like it can propel a run if you get the right boons, whereas in the first there were some clear goats like Athena. Animations look gorgeous, and there's so much to build around because of the increase of combat options. I especially love the Selene boons, which is essentially the replacement of the ults of the first, and instead gives you a plethora of hexes to choose from, and each additional boon gives you progress in a tree to expand that given hex. This can get really cool when one of the gods you already have duo with Selene to create some heavy hitting hexes. My only real problem with progression within runs is builds themselves. They feel a lot more similar than dissimilar, and I miss a bit of the randomness that the first game had. In Hades 2, it is quite easy to have a build in mind pre-run and be able to implement within the run themselves. The weapons feel way more important than the boons and upgrades in a run. The hammer upgrades do less of a complete transformation of weapons and more so just serves as some random type of bonus like additional damage or attacks lasting longer, rather than a complete overhaul, and I really miss this aspect. However, in a way, shifting this focus does put more emphasis on how boons interact with one another to create silly amounts of DPS, and this can be fun as well. I just miss a bit of the random spark that highlighted runs in the first. When titling video clips during victories in Hades 1, I would specify the upgrades to help me remember which dub is which, versus in Hades 2 I would specify the weapon I used, which tended to be much more important. As far as level progression goes, they took my criticism from the first game to fucking heart. The first layer is exactly like the first game's approach of this or that. However, each zone adds its own unique twist to this formula, with the underwater zone providing additional paths at the cost of another wave of enemies. The Hellfields are open zoned with multiple boons/resources spread throughout an open map, and Kronos' layer has a set path that you can deviate from at the cost of possible health or life loss. And there's another fucking world up top. The abandoned city is my favorite, with the city having roughly 10 or so doors, and you get to pick any 5 out of this conglomerate. The ship maintains the same encounter locations, but multiple rewards for each. Mount Olympus has the option of this or that, with the twist of having some paths giving you added damage on entering the next encounter. So many creative approaches to help spice up this formula that truly helps Hades 2 shine and prevents repetition from hurting the overall enjoyment. Finally, a big benefit Hades 2 does have are the mid-run NPCs boons, which tended to be some of my favorites. Athena is no longer a main goddess who gives boons, but she can appear and gift you the godly divine dash. Same case for Dionysus, who has been relegated to mid-run NPC, but his buffs are some of my favorites. He gives access to his hangover abilities from the first game, and then there's Icarus, who has his own suite of upgrades on the ship, the witches, who can each grant unique bonuses, and Hermes' mobile shop, which can be great for providing additional boons. Below ground you have Arachne, who can give you armor and cool colored dresses. You have the Mimic Girl, who can do a copy of a boon, or take one from a previous run, which is a stroke of genius. And just each and every one of these NPCs provide their own power-ups, which breathe life into runs. In the original Hades, these NPCs usually just gave health or resources, but here they can be the difference between a lost run and a successful one. I know I said that was my final section, but thank God I am a notorious liar because I just wanted to mention the familiars. No reason other than because they're cute, and I like them. And, most importantly, Frog. Overall, the progression of Hades 2 is next level, especially outside of runs, and is the best example of Hades 2 taking the ball and running with it in terms of expanding on systems.
We got your back, sister.
So which is better? The question really comes down to individual runs or the progression system as a whole. Hades has my pick for run progression and story progression, but Hades 2 is just miles ahead on every actual progression system that is present in the game. The amount of stuff to unlock, the amount of upgrades to strive for, and a run progression that, while not quite Hades, is still no slouch. While I believe undoubtedly Hades deserves a tip of the cap, Hades 2 demands the entire fucking hat. I'm going with Hades 2. Now for the combat. Hades combat is fucking anarchy, dude. Hades is like a mix of bullet hell, ARPGs, and beat 'em ups. Fights only last a matter of seconds, but there's so much action packed into these precious moments. In combat, you have a regular attack, a special attack, your casts, which are like this projectile thingy, your dash/dash attack, and occasionally you might have a boon that gives you access to a god's special attack that requires the charging of the bar in the bottom left. Seems simple, but there is so much to unpack here. For one, each weapon has its own unique attack, so no two weapons are truly the same. Boons can also provide added benefits to each one of these moves, resulting in your focus shifting on whatever boons best complement your playstyle. For instance, I normally prefer just dash attacking and regular attacking, but there were many times where I'd get a great boon that caused me to shift my playstyle to incorporate specials, or maybe casts into play. However, among every run, every level, every boss, one thing remained the same. Dash spam. Holy hell, you will be fucking dashing all over the place in order to prevent being hit. The game rewards this constant movement, and so many fights turn into button mashing fests. But I would argue it is strategic button mashing. I just held my index finger up in the air like a fucking nerd.
Actually, it is strategic.
This hectic playstyle had me curling toes and increasing heart rate. Fights are action-packed and thrilling. There were many boss fights where I would have to put the controller down after and do the certified gamer hand cramp shake. My only complaint is how effective this strategy is throughout. It was rare that I would be forced to change up my style, and mashing and dashing through each fight seemed to be the best approach in just about every circumstance. Sure, there were some weapons that don't benefit from constant moving, but I found myself often struggling with these that insisted on standing your ground and planting your feet. I think the enemy variety is partly to blame for this. The designs are fantastic, but the gimmicks can be a bit lacking. The enemy in the first zone pretty much behaves exactly like the enemies in the last zone. Sure, they have their own style and animations, but every single one can be boiled down to a physical or ranged attacker. Approach appropriately, and you'll be fine. Where things do get spiced up are in the boss fights. I think these bosses are pretty phenomenal, so much so that I insisted on not only beating them each time, but beating them with their additional, harder heat gimmicks known as vows. Meg is such a perfect first boss, hitting like a truck and having relatively tricky movement patterns that can catch you quite off guard early on. The first boss also changes to implement Meg's sisters, which each have their own patterns and gimmicks to the fight, so you never know which boss you're going to be fighting first on any given run. The higher heat gimmick is having multiple sisters doing their attacks at once, which can get quite abrasive and hard to juggle these two attack patterns. The Bone Hydra is the weakest in my opinion. There's no interactions with it and it kind of just spams projectiles at you. Its main gimmick is summoning other smaller heads you have to beat while it's impervious to damage, but this one never really gave me any trouble. It is a bit lame despite looking cool as hell. Its special vow is turning the entire fucking floor to lava, and I despise this one the most. Theseus and the Minotaur Minos are definitely the hardest of the bunch, as they kind of have a unique duo boss that plays really well off one another. Theseus attacks from afar while the Minotaur gets up in your face, and I just love the fight itself, the location, and the banter with each. Especially the times where you catch Minos as a mini-boss and get to hear him bitch about his partner Theseus, who is such an annoying little fuck that feels so good to beat. Their vow is to provide armor, which feels a bit lazy, but I adore the portraits during this, so I'll let it slide. Finally, the end villain, Hades, who is perfection. Hades does a great job with its progression. I remember the first time I fought this monster and realized he had an entire second phase. I was sure that there was no chance in hell I could ever beat him. The first fight makes him feel larger than life, and he deals massive damage. However, like your good friend Sisyphus, it's all about rolling that boulder back up the hill and incrementally getting stronger until you can finally properly face him, and he is great. The soundtrack rips, the aura on display is next level, and most importantly, it feels fair. I never felt fucked by this boss, and each time I lost, I knew it was coming because I was either playing lazy or misunderstanding his attacks. Easily the best boss in the game, and a perfect stamp to end a run on. The beauty with combat is the dance it does with progression. As Zagreus gets stronger through the mirror, you start to understand how you best control Zagreus, leading each run feeling like you are getting better at the game. You start to memorize patterns of bosses, you know the optimal routes to take, your favorite gods and goddesses, and the best approaches for each weapon for your specific playstyle. Combat is straight addicting, and while sure it can get a bit repetitive, the boons and progression allows the feeling of your power curve to set in and lets you get lost in some good old-fashioned stunting on the hose. So how is Hades 2 combat? One thing I love about Hades 2 that I feel the need to emphasize is how well it stands on its own. Hades 2 is not a replacement of Hades. Both play and feel significantly different while maintaining similar structures. There is no better example of this at play than the combat of Hades 2. You still have the regular attack, special, dash/dash attack, and your big boomer hex, but this game introduces something new. You now have a pool of magic you pull from in order to do Omega moves. These are charged up attacks for your regular, your special, and your cast. In this game, your cast is no longer a projectile, but a circle that you slap down underneath you. Obviously, with select boons this can change, but the base cast is just a binding circle. The Omegas and Magic Pool add so much to this game. It adds something you have to actively watch and pay attention to in combat, and it adds another layer of upgrades you can pursue on runs. The Omegas are so fun to use, and each is so distinct from one another. It's not just a stronger attack. Oftentimes, it is its very own move, so this ostensibly doubles the amount of actions Melanoid can take when compared to Zagreus. And most importantly, the dash spam is no longer. There is a slight recovery time after a dash, and this one move changes the entire feel and approach of combat. Positioning is more important than it's ever been, and it requires engaging with enemies' moves and approaches since you can't just spam dodge attacks on them endlessly. This gives combat a sense of weight, and just as importantly, strategy. You can't go gung-ho on enemies, you have to have a proper build to make it through each encounter, and enemies are way more unique than in the first. Enemies in the first zone are nothing like those sons of bitches in Kronos' lair. They're unique and require different approaches with how to deal with each. Sure, combat now feels a bit slower, but this allows the system to shine because you have to properly engage with it in its entirety. In Hades 1, a good build can waltz you through each zone, versus here, each good build can just help you out with certain selections in a zone, but you still need to maintain some sort of focus to get through the enemies, which are tougher for your specific build. Combat feels like it goes the extra mile, and in turn makes combat much more immersive and requires a sort of juggling of focus that was absent from the first. The final part of Hades 2 combat to talk about is the bosses. Damn near no misses here, so I want to briefly cover them each. Hecate is a wonderful opening boss who teaches valuable lessons about how important positioning is in this game and is a perfect tone setter. It also allows for a boss that you can converse with back at the crossroads, which was one of my favorite aspects in Hades 1. Her vow alternate is kinda gimmicky with just multiple copies of herself, but it can lead to a bunch of visual noise which can fuck you up if you're not careful. Scylla in the Sirens is absolutely phenomenal. Never a complete pushover, and each of the three bosses plays off one another beautifully, and the incorporation of the soundtrack into the boss fight is so fucking good. Killing one of the Sirens gets rid of that respective instrumental track in the background, and it is such a unique and fun gimmick that instills oodles of personality into a fight that is already oozing style. Their vow adds the Kraken into the mix, which is also perfect, and the song becomes slightly altered. However, I didn't find it particularly added much challenge, but still, regardless, a cool spectacle. Cerberus is really cool in concept, finally being able to fight the boss that was reserved for a punchline in the first, but fucking A, this one can be a bitch. The first time fighting him was my big what the fuck moment, cause he clapped me. Once you find out the secret of just staying behind him the entire time, and the fact that every attack has some sort of splash, he becomes a bit of pushover, which is just a shame. His vow also gave me Vietnam flashbacks to Hydra's vow, which is just a lava gimmick, but this one is even more brutal because of how Cerberus can quite literally cover any standable zone in its attacks, which feels downright unfair and silly. Fuck lava. Finally, we have Kronos, who is definitely my favorite boss fight in the game. The track is always fucking bumpin', and the shit-talking pre-face-off is my favorite of the Mel interactions. The boss fight location is cool as hell, his design is cool as hell, and the fight itself is downright phenomenal. All the time-based attacks and gimmicks just add to the stakes and atmosphere, and he is definitely no pushover. Positioning is key, understanding patterns and recognizing them in time is important, and just the feel and look of it all leads to an unforgettable showdown each and every time. Never feels unfair, never feels like a cakewalk. It truly is a great final encounter for the underworld. Normally this is where it would end, but gee fucking willikers, there's a whole nother run up top. First off is the Cyclops, who is definitely one of the funniest characters in the game, design included. The voice acting is mimicking these old-timey gangster goons, and it fits perfectly. Plus he can be a bit of a pain in the ass with the shockwave attacks, which hit me more often than I'd like to admit. That fucking poison vow made me want to rip my nuts clean off, but it is what it is. Any degenerate Blighttown enjoyer's wet dream, I suppose. Eris fucking sucks. I would say she is my least favorite, despite being a cool idea. Finding a boss who has abducted one of the ancient arms is really cool in theory, but fuck me if it isn't the most downright annoying, obnoxious character to wield them. Yes, I get that's the point, but I don't care if an annoying character's point is to be annoying. They still are. Her vow is also a great idea, with the switch up being an alternate aspect to the railgun, but still, she fucking stinks and her fights are super easy. Next is Prometheus, who is probably the boss I struggled with the most consistently. Even towards my finishing run, Prometheus was never a guarantee that I would escape without losing a life. His attacks are quick and hit like a truck. The memorization bit is a little too gimmicky for my taste, but it is cool to see the developers utilize a change in camera perspective. And the vow. Probably my favorite of the bunch due to its extreme difficulty and the concept. It not only is an additional spike to this already tough fight, but it also serves as a plot point, finding out that Heracles and Prometheus are in cahoots. Plus, it's not just a carbon copy fight. Their styles are completely different, and fighting off Heracles while trying to fucking play memory games with the Prometheus area blast is much more difficult than it seems. Fantastic addition to a great fight that always seemed to frustrate me in the best possible way. Finally is Typhon. He is pretty mid, unfortunately, especially being the final boss of the overworld. His design is great, his animations are top notch, his different sprites for how much damage he has taken are phenomenal. The Zeus alley-oop mid-fight and the lack of health bar all lead to intense aura surrounding him. But god damn it, this little bitch sucks. I only ever lost to him once, and it was entirely due to greed reasons and me just running through the motions and playing sloppily rather than giving any sort of respect to the fight. He is a complete pushover, as well as a monster, so there's no conversations with him, and he just falls flat as the final boss of the overworld. Prometheus is way cooler, and despite the fantastic presentation, I was a bit let down by the fight itself. So that's the combat. My oh my, what a great system. Improves and expands upon many flaws of the first, all without serving as a replacement, rather a new breath of life into a system that was already fun. Better bosses, more thought required within combat, and phenomenal enemies to fight through. Combat is a shining beacon on the head of a great progression system.
You got beaten by a tiny little rodent?
Wowie. What two combat systems to compare. Each different and distinct enough from one another that this comparison does not feel mute. Often in Hades, my heart would be pounding after close combat encounters or boss fights. This is due to the rapid pace and white-knuckle action experiences that each encounter provided, and I found each of these frenzied fights engaging in the best possible way. In Hades 2, I was much more focused and dialed into every location I entered. My eyes darted between incoming attacks in my mana bar and my positioning. So much to juggle, yet this led to one of the cleanest and smoothest combat systems I've seen in the action RPG genre. It's like comparing a UFC cage match to a boxing bout. I can see the pros and cons of each, but I think the biggest factor in my decision is just the enemies and bosses. They are next level in Hades 2 and allows this combat system to shine even brighter. I'm going to side with Hades 2 on the combat front. Finally, we move on to the miscellaneous section.
You vile, insignificant hellspawn.
So normally, this section is reserved for companions. If no companions, then characters, and if no character focuses, then we move on to the bosses. There are no straight up companions. I already covered most of the characters I care about, and bosses felt like a natural fit in the combat section. So where the fuck do we go from here? If you did not mash the 10-second skip through the intro, you know the answer. It's weapons. Weapons are the bread and butter of each Hades' entire runs. They define the class or the playstyle you are using for your run, and they are pretty widely varied. So I'll talk about each and their aspects and rank them in order of enjoyment.
Get on.
Oakley dokley, let's get started with the OG Hades. In dead last fucking place is the sword. Now the sword is not bad, it just feels a bit bland in comparison to all of your other options. Its range is pitiful and its special just feels like a stronger attack. Now it does have really cool aspects to go along with it, but even this just comes off as cool little gimmicks to spice up a rather bland showing. It's like adding fucking salt to boiled chicken. Like yeah, I suppose it's a little better, but meh. This is the weapon I had the most trouble reliably winning with, and all the upgrades just mainly affect its combo rather than the overall moveset. The shockwave thing is cool, but even that one just adds a projectile to a boring ass melee weapon. Definitely screams starter weapon, and I dropped this one rather quickly. Next up is the spear. Now this one has quite a bit more versatility than the sword, but it still feels like a jack of all trades rather than a master in a speciality. The ranged option does allow you to garner some space against enemies, but it is piss weak, leading every build to revolve around the melee portion. Sure, there are some fun aspects that can spice up the special, like the charge attack variation, but again, with the spear, up close and personal is the last place you want to be, causing this one to fall to the wayside. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination, just a little lacking, being too weak to be close, absent decent boons and upgrades, and far too weak to comfortably attack from afar. Next, we have the bow and arrow. This one is tricky. On its own, I think it kind of sucks fat, juicy balls, but with the right boons and aspects and upgrades, you can be blasting ass all the way from fucking Singapore to France. It starts off rather slow and methodical, but with rare boons and fun upgrades, you can be spamming specials or nuking enemies with charged regular attacks. It really does spread the gambit. The only reason it falls into the bottom half is because it is so RNG dependent, but man, when everything is clicking, this is one of the most fun weapons. Breaking the top half, we have the shield. It is embarrassing to admit, but I did not realize until halfway through the game that your charged attack blocks all incoming damage, so oops. This was a complete and utter game changer. There are so many ways to take a build, which is where my favorite weapons lie. Its attack, charge attack, and specials are all extremely fun to build around, and the shield has some of my favorite hammer upgrades of the bunch. It has crazy variety with its aspects and allows for a defensive or offensive playstyle, depending on the boons you have acquired and the type of fucking man/woman/they/them you really are. Really fun that requires a bit of trial and error to finally unlock its full potential. With the silver medal, I gotta go with the knuckles. Where are my true knuckleheads at? Hades is a fucking brawl with its combat system, so what better weapons to use than fucking lightning and thunder, baby? Beating ass with your bare hands is so fun, and it allows the anarchy of combat to shine as you will be dashing and constantly attacking 24/7. It simultaneously allows for feverish balls-to-the-wall swing fests, as well as agile dashing around the map combat. It is the perfect weapon to match the pure spectacle of the craziness of combat, and it almost feels the most fitting to wield. Sure, it can be tough, and there are plenty of runs that died early because of how aggressive it forces you to play, but as the fucking GOAT Emiliano Zapata said, rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Catch me in the octagon throwing hands with that bitch-ass dad of mine. And in first place, we have the adamant rail. I wish there was some sort of cool multi-layered analysis breakdown I can give you, but honestly, monkey neuron activates a gun. This is the most reliable weapon that constantly got me to Hades himself. Now, many can argue that due to its playstyle, it forced my ADHD-riddled brain to actually slow the fuck down and approach bosses with some sort of respect. But that's just fucking lib propaganda getting to you. Don't believe the hype. This thing is fun, and the ammo aspect actually forces you to balance multiple aspects within combat, hearkening to the future advances Hades 2 would make. It also is the most malleable, with all of my runs looking pretty radically different, all incorporating different abilities and upgrades into the fold. On some runs I hardly touched the regular attack, others had it becoming my go-to. It just opened the door to opportunity, and most of my favorite builds and runs, looking back, all revolved around the adamant rail. Sure, it kind of goes against the super aggro approach that Hades demands, but maybe the fact that it forced me to interact with positioning and approach led me to the most enjoyment, the same aspects that Hades 2 capitalized on. Just a unique weapon that I had a blast completing runs with, and that's the weapons for Hades. Overall, great selection, running the gambit from simple to more complex, and every single weapon had multiple aspects to alter their playstyle, so it is completely easy to find a favorite. Or, it was a common occurrence to overlook one until I did a run with a newly unlocked aspect. So much depth without overwhelming the player. It truly served as the backbone of your run and your combat system, with the brilliant boon system serving as icing on the cake.
In the name of Hades.
Now we giggity our way to Hades 2. One thing I can respect about Hades 2 is how similar some of these weapons feel without outright using the same weapons. Sure, the staff may have similar attacks to the spear, or the ammo gimmick works the same with skulls as it does rail, but these are pretty distinct and unique weapon sets. Again, this plays into my favorite aspect of Hades 2, which is expanding without replacing. So let's tackle this expansion of weaponry, going from least favorite to favorite. Up first in the ass tier is the sister blades, or the daggers. These are just so boring. I farted. The up-close, fast-paced, manic combat system feels so out of place here. In the original Hades, I could see this bitch being my bread and butter, but in Hades 2, it just feels archaic. The upgrades are weak, and there are no real changes to the playstyle. Every single hammer upgrade just increases damage or projectile count, leading your first run through with the blades feeling exactly like your successive runs after. Just a bit light on depth and a step back from what makes Hades 2 combat shine, so I rarely use these despite being unambiguously pretty strong. Next up is the black coat, or the mech suit. Upon reveal, I thought this was so sick. It stood out in a very abrasive but positive way, so I was super excited to do a run through with these. But they are, unfortunately, extremely one-dimensional. I hardly ever use the regular attack, as it revolves around staying stationary, and the regular special might as well not exist. So I'd only ever use the Omega special, which is the lock on rockets, and the dash attack, which is okay, just extremely weak. I tried deviating from this approach, but somehow, someway, I always ended up back here at where I started. This may be my personal playstyle that led me here, but I can't help feeling like the coolness is never matched by the gameplay. Maybe there is some sort of synthesis with the particular boon or aspect, but I sure as fuck never found it, and it left me slightly disappointed due entirely to how hype unlocking this was. Right around the middle we have the staff. If we're going starter weapon versus starter weapon, Hades 2 easily wins, as having a jack of all trades, master of none weapon makes much more sense than a basic bitch weapon. The staff has range, it boosts magic, and it doesn't require too much babysitting, allowing for the magic systems of Hades 2 to shine, and serves as a perfect intro to these new magic systems. It even becomes more ridiculous with hammer upgrades and aspects, which allows it to truly reach its peak. It is one of those weapons I genuinely have no notes about. What you see is what you get, and if you invest heavily enough into it, you will be quite satisfied with your returns. Definitely had some personal favorite runs with this bad boy, and I could not think of a better starter weapon. Cracking the top half is the axe. The axe is the very first weapon I completed a run with, and this fucker is fun. Sure, like the blades, this is melee focused, but if you're gonna be melee focused, you better be strong and have flexibility. The axe has plenty of both. Its best attribute is its variety of attacks. It has a regular combo attack, a spinning Omega attack, a tri-hit special, and a wide splash Omega special. Any single one of these can be fixated on within a build, and all of them are equally viable. My favorite part of this weapon is the weight. Attacks propel you forward. Chain combos take time. This is not some agile on-the-fly weapon. This bitch is a heifer. But mastering the timing is just as fun as fleshing out the build. No weapon in the entire game has the weight of power quite like the axe. Feels like I'm swinging a fucking tree trunk, and it helps make attacks all the more satisfying. Also, the scythe aspect looked raw as fuck. It makes me feel like the Jamaican Reaper from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, so cry to someone else. In second place, we have the skulls. I really enjoyed these little fellas, and it felt like the most fitting weapon for the tone of the game. The balance of ammo feels less important, but the fetching of projectiles adds a bit of flair to this weapon. It also has my favorite special in the entire cluster of weapons. That giant skull feels so good to rip, and the many aspects of the skull actually provide a varied supply of runs that feel completely different. The upgrades can feel slightly underwhelming, but it feels like the most workable within the boon system. Some weapons can favor certain types of boons, but the skull truly is one size fits all. It allows progression within runs to mimic Hades in a much more obvious way because of how many different boons slide right into its moveset. It would have easily been my favorite, if not for one more. The torches. Man, I fucking love the torches. This provides the best addition to the bullet hell landscapes, the best aspect, hands down, and the easiest to power scale, leading to extremely fun builds. Let's get the hammer upgrades out of the way. They're boring. One extra floating orb, stronger blasts, your Omega's dilly-dallying for longer, it's all mid. But the overwhelming amount of builds and the ease of access to these builds are astounding. Because of the automatic nature to Omega attacks, any upgrade to your attack immediately sets you off right, and plenty of times your special can be pulling just as much, if not more weight than your regular. The range combined with the close quarters aspect to the special attack leads to a variety unrivaled by other weapons. And my single favorite aspect in the game, the aspect of Moros. Yeah, I looked that shit up. Is just hands down my favorite weapon in either game. Your special shoots these little cute ghosties who deal continuous damage, and the boon increased attack can change what these little spirits look like. It is such a tiny detail, but one I could not get enough of. If you hit the little guys with your special, then they explode and do extra damage, thus incentivizing complementary boons, which leads to very easy access to dual boons, which just makes for memorable runs. I had a fire and ice run with the wee fellas, lightning and water, and many more. Even outside of the cute little fuckers, the torches just had my favorite animations of any weapon and looked gorgeous to wield. Easily my overall favorite, and I guarantee in future runs I do, this will not change.
Let's see how this goes.
So, which game has better weapons? This one is tough because of the major differences. I would say Hades 2 has the better weapons, but also the least exciting variety. Boons and upgrades don't necessarily alter a weapon's function versus Hades, where this happened regularly, and this is part of my favorite aspect to Hades, the pure chance of it. Hades weapons are extremely fun and much easier to mold and change and play around with, but Hades 2 has the benefit of presentation, with each weapon having gorgeous details surrounding their each and every attack. I'm just gonna go ahead and take the coward's way out and call it a draw. These two sets perfectly play off one another and help ensure that each game has a variety of notable playstyles to accent the perfection that permeates the individual runs that you may experience.
You think that you prevailed?
So here we are, the conclusion. Which is better, Hades or Hades 2? Let's start with Hades. Hades was lightning in a bottle. A true masterpiece in terms of balancing a plethora of genres and containing that ambition within the bottle known as the roguelite. It knew exactly what it was and exactly what it wanted to be without ever missing a step or overextending itself. A masterclass in storytelling, combat looping, and pacing. It forgoes the desire to tell a world-shattering tale to focus on the intimacy of family and letting its combat and progression systems speak volumes for themselves. An addicting and never boring game that can either provide the perfect 25 hours or the satisfactory 100 hours. A must-play if there ever was one. I would give Hades an A+. Sure, it does not quite crack the S tier due to its lack of scale and eventual repetitive gameplay, but its perfection of the easily understandable, the fun-to-master gameplay, and the overall respect for the player's time leads to a beautiful little roguelike that even a little sweaty RPG nerd can love. Now for Hades 2. Being the little sibling of one of the most highly lauded video games of the past 10 years lives some rather large shoes to fill. And Hades 2 comes in with its big-ass Shaq feet, ready to get the job done. It improves upon what was previously considered the peak combat within the roguelite genre. It takes the lacking overarching progression system and dials it up to 10. It takes a presentation that was gorgeous as it was iconic and pushes it even further. Unfortunately, with all these great steps forward, it takes a massive one backwards. That ending truly sours what were great stakes and soils an all-time villain whose fight was as exciting as its build-up. This leads to an ending that falters and leaves a nasty little aftertaste after what was truly a decade-defining experience. However, a game is not just one of its attributes. No matter how underwhelming this ending was, it will never erase the hours I spent enthralled and in love with everything else this game had to offer prior to this conclusion. I would give Hades 2 an A+ as well. But I would put it right above Hades. This conclusion may seem a bit underwhelming, I certainly feel so, but I just want to remind the audience of one thing. Being a little bit better than Hades, the GOAT of the roguelike, means being leaps and bounds better than a lot. Hades 2 is a fantastic game that deserves all its praise and then some, and truly deserves its spot among the greats. So, is Hades 2 better than Hades? Yes. Yes, it is. Thank you so much for watching my video. Here is the updated tier list with Hades and Hades 2 side by side. Give you a little bit to look over my list, and if any placing perplexes you, brother, there are videos galore to look back on. Every thumbnail should include the game, so if there are only one or two here that you're confused or interested with, then click that video and skip to their respective section. I truly appreciate you hearing this nerd ramble, and I hope I said something that either opened your mind to a differing perspective or provided a voice to a feeling you had but couldn't articulate. My next video coming out is probably going to be my next installment in the Best 100 RPGs of All Time series, as I am just about through editing it, but change focus to this one post Hades 2 release. After that, I will be doing a Pokemon Legends Is It Better Than, so if that interests you, stay tuned and subscribe. Truly, once again, thank you so much for watching, and finally, I don't have a signing off section, so I guess.